listening to the Four Questions with an Engineer podcast, the show that brings you bearing insights from CCTY Bearing. Today, we are discussing how non-technical elements impact design with Corey Helgeson. Corey, what is the benefit of providing a project timeline?
So first and foremost, we need to meet the delivery. We need to know when the parts need to be delivered and work backwards from there. How do we get there? The goal is always to spend the optimal time at each stage of the process. The quoting process, the manufacturing process, the design process, and the shipping process. We know how long these things take, and we know how long it can take to recover from one of those processes going wrong. So if we're conscious of the timeline, we can allot the proper time at each stage for all these things. If we're not conscious of the timeline, that means we may be rushing one of these stages or rushing at some time. This can lead to mistakes that are pretty easy to avoid.
Is it helpful to provide a target price?
Overall, I think it is very helpful. This may be more from my scope, but I know each situation is different. You know, there's commodity parts, there's more design heavy parts. And I think something more unique about some of the parts we make is it's not just a yes or no type of design, right? There's a lot of industries, a lot of parts where it's this part either does the job or doesn't do the job. With bearings, a lot of times it's this part does the job well, this part does the job okay, or this part doesn't do the job. So that is kind of a bigger reason why price can vary and can be different considerations. I do understand the reason customers would want to be more hesitant, but at the same time, I think most good suppliers know you can't overcharge for a part. Otherwise, you're not going to have that part very long. I think it's especially beneficial for the design heavy parts, like most of the parts we work on, because if it can be considered the entire time, we can provide input throughout the whole process. The material selection, the structure, the plating. We think this would be more beneficial for you, or this structure isn't feasible with this price. We can provide a lot of extra input that's going to help both parties. At the same time, we all know that cost is always considered, and low cost is always the optimal goal. But I think input early in the process can be helpful. More so, we could say it's price transparency. A customer might say, we care about the clearance a lot, so we're willing to pay a little more for a better material. Or we don't really see an issue with this amount of play, so we care more about this price being at this point. All these things are very helpful from the beginning. And at the same time, a good supplier is going to know the market pretty well. Sometimes it's not even feasible. If a customer is working on a completely new concept, right, and they need to be in the market for a certain price, and the only way they can get the market at that price is if the bearing or the rod end costs X amount. We can say in the beginning that that's not even possible. Even the raw material exceeds that cost, so you're not going to be able to do that. Or we think you can do that with this consideration. So that is more helpful than going through hours and weeks of design, making all the surrounding components just to then quote it and get to a management review and say, you know what, we can't go out in the market at this price. We have to scrap the whole design. And I guess my final point is it's much easier if we start with the price in mind than if we go around and make the surrounding components and structures and then realize at that point it needs to be changed, because as the design becomes more set in stone, any change is a lot more complicated than if you start from the beginning with that in mind.
How does estimated annual usage impact design?
So similar to target price, an accurate EAU can be helpful. It also is one of those things that case to case and can be different for different parts, but it's something that's also considered for all the manufacturing processes. And how are we going to set up this process? Do we need to make a machine to do it? Do we need an automation process here? It's considered the whole way through, so it is important and it can be beneficial. Also, it's helpful if a customer can say, well, we're going to use X yearly, but we're willing to purchase 2 years quantity at one time. So we're willing to place an order for 2 years quantity. These things can all be very helpful for both parties, because we can consider processes that maybe we wouldn't even consider if the quantity was cut in half. If the AU is way low, maybe we didn't consider something we could have to make the part more efficient, make the manufacturing cheaper. If the AU is way, way high, maybe we can't use the processes we initially intended or we initially produced the samples with. So now we have an issue where we change some of the processes, and do the parts need to be revalidated? Do we need to change the cost? So it is one of those things that's hard to predict, but if some thoughts put into it and some reasoning that makes sense and we can get closer to the right quantity, we can always improve the product and the cost and the efficiency.
Why is it important to order samples?
So this isn't something that happens too often, but every once in a while we will get a order for some parts that go straight to production and there's no sample order. I'm mostly talking about parts that are not commodity. There's a little something different about them. And also if the customer hasn't really used this type of part before in their system. We don't know your system 100% and you don't know our process 100%. So there's always things that can be overlooked even if the parts are made perfectly to spec, got delivered on time. There's things that you don't always consider that when you put it in the system or you make a prototype, it's very clear right away. So there's things like that can be avoided very easily if samples are made and the tests are done. The other thing I would say is when we make a part that is different, we generally have the process pretty clear because we make similar parts the same way, but we don't make parts with that exact same process. So it's important for us to also validate our process and make sure that we do everything to make sure that when production comes, we can deliver the parts on time, efficiently, and produce them to spec.
And that's all for this episode. Make sure to visit our website, cctybearing.com, where you can subscribe to the show and learn more about bearings.